On the heaviest snowfall night Chicago had seen that year, Richard Vaughn leaned close to Victoria Hale's ear and whispered a sentence that froze her in place. "You have money, you have power, but no man will ever truly love you." 3 weeks later, the entire financial world mocked when the millionaire announced her marriage to her own secretary, a poor single father with only a small daughter. They called it desperation. But months later, during another blizzard, no one dared to laugh anymore. The winter investment gala at the Drake Hotel occupied 3 floors of crystalline elegance. Outside, snow fell in sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each flake catching the cold yellow light from chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Victoria Hale stood near the bar, her champagne untouched, watching the crowd with the practiced detachment of someone who'd attended 100 of these events. She was 42, self-made, and controlled a portfolio worth north of $300 million. Her reputation in venture capital was built on brutal precision. She found promising startups, invested at the perfect moment, and extracted returns that made competitors envious. Tonight she wore a black gown that cost $8,000 but looked understated, which was precisely the point. Richard Vaughn entered at 9:15. She noticed him immediately, not because she still cared, but because everyone else turned to look. He'd been her partner for 4 years, both in business and in bed, until 18 months ago when he decided that 40 was too old for him. The woman on his arm tonight couldn't have been more than 27, blonde, wearing red like a declaration. Victoria didn't move. She trained herself not to react. The gala continued around her. Conversations about market corrections, whispers about federal interest rates, laughter that sounded expensive. Richard worked the room methodically, his hand on the blonde's lower back, steering her like a prized possession. He was heading towards Victoria's section. Of course he was. Victoria, his voice was warm, practiced. "You look well, Richard." She didn't offer more. The blonde smiled with too many teeth. Richard made introductions that Victoria immediately forgot. The snow outside intensified, wind rattling the massive windows. Someone laughed too loudly nearby. The blonde excused herself to find the restroom. That's when Richard leaned in, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something different than what he'd worn with her. His breath was warm against her ear, his voice low enough that only she could hear it over the orchestra music. "You have money, you have power, but no man will ever truly love you." He pulled back, smiled like he'd said something pleasant, and walked away to rejoin the blonde. Victoria stood perfectly still. The champagne glass in her hand didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. Around her, the gala continued, deals being made, connections being forged, the machinery of wealth grinding forward as it always did. But inside, something cracked. She left 20 minutes later, declining 3 networking opportunities and a dinner invitation. Her driver brought the car around. Snow had covered the streets in a thick white blanket that muffled all sound. Chicago in winter became a different city. Softer edges, harder survival. In the back seat, Victoria watched the city slide past. Tower lights reflected off the snow like cold stars. The driver said nothing, which she appreciated. They'd worked together for 6 years. He knew when silence was required. Richard's words circled in her mind. The cruelty wasn't in their delivery. He'd been almost gentle, but in their accuracy. She thought about the relationships she'd had, 3 serious ones over 20 years. Each had ended when the man realized that Victoria Hale, the person, was indistinguishable from Victoria Hale, the empire. She didn't know how to separate them, wasn't sure she wanted to. The car pulled up to her building. The doorman opened her door, snow swirling around his coat. She thanked him and rode the elevator to the penthouse. 32nd floor, windows facing the lake, everything exactly as she'd left it that morning, empty. She poured herself scotch and stood at the window watching snow fall over the frozen lake. The city lights created an orange glow against the storm clouds. Beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to everything happening beneath it. Richard's words hurt because they touched something true. She'd built an empire, but she'd built it alone. And somewhere in the construction, she'd forgotten or perhaps never learned how to let anyone else inside. The scotch was expensive and tasted like smoke. The snow kept falling. Malik Carter had worked for Victoria Hale for 3 years, and in that time he'd never been late once. Not during the blizzard of 2023 that shut down half the city. Not when the L train broke down and he'd walked 4 miles in sub-zero wind. Not when his daughter Nia had the flu and he'd been up all night. 7:45, every morning. Without exception, Victoria noticed him because of the coffee. He brought it each morning. Black. No sugar, exactly the right temperature, and set it on her desk without commentary. He never asked how her evening had been, never offered sympathy when a deal fell through, never celebrated too loudly when one succeeded. He simply maintained the infrastructure of her life with quiet efficiency. Good morning? His voice was steady, unremarkable. He was 34, but looked older in the way that people with responsibility often do. Deep brown skin, tight black curls, kept close cropped for convenience, not style. A suit that was clean and professional, but clearly off the rack. Wedding ring absent, but a thin line of lighter skin where one had been. A black single dad who carried himself like a man who understood exactly how fragile stability could be. Morning! Victoria took the coffee, perfect as always. The Pearson file on your tablet. I've highlighted the sections their legal team flagged. He set down her schedule printed because she preferred paper for appointments. You have a call with Singapore at 11. The market analysis you requested is in your email, and the Tribune wants a comment on the merger by 3. Tell them 4. Done. He turned to leave. Malik. He paused, half-turned. Patient, but not overly attentive. Thank you. He nodded once and left her office. No fuss, no false modesty, just acknowledgement that he'd done his job well and knew it. Victoria watched through her office glass as he settled at his desk outside. He worked with the same steady rhythm he brought to everything. No wasted motion, no drama. Other assistants in the building treated their positions like stepping stones, constantly networking, angling for promotions. Malik simply worked. She knew almost nothing about his personal life. He'd mentioned a daughter once during his interview. Single father, the background check had confirmed. Divorced 2 years before he'd applied. No criminal record, no debt beyond the normal struggles of raising a child alone on a secretary's salary. References had been glowing, but modest, reliable, professional, discreet. The morning proceeded as it always did. Calls were answered, files were prepared, problems were solved before Victoria knew they existed. At noon, Malik knocked once and entered with lunch, a salad from the place she liked, dressing on the side. You didn't eat breakfast, he said simply. She hadn't. She never did after bad nights, and somehow he'd noticed. Thank you. He nodded and left. Through the glass, she watched him eat his own lunch at his desk, a sandwich he'd brought from home, carefully wrapped. He ate quickly, efficiently, then returned to work. No phone calls to friends, no mindless browsing, just work, steady and constant. At 5:30, he appeared at her door. I'm leaving now unless you need anything else. Daycare pickup? Yes, ma'am. Her name is Nia, isn't it? Something flickered in his expression. Not displeasure exactly, but a careful recalibration. Yes. How old? 7. Victoria nodded. Have a good evening. He left and she watched him navigate the office toward the elevators. Other employees were packing up, chatting, making plans for drinks. Malik walked through them like a man with a singular purpose. The elevator doors closed and he was gone. She turned back to her window. Snow had started again, light flurries that wouldn't amount to much. The city below was transitioning from day to night. Lights coming on in buildings, traffic thickening on the streets. Millions of people, each with their own complicated lives. Malik Carter was one of them. A black single father doing the best he could with what he had. He asked for nothing beyond his paycheck. Expected nothing beyond the work itself. And in 3 years, he'd never once looked at her with pity or judgment or hunger for something more. He was, she realized, the most honest person in her life. The snow came overnight, heavy and relentless. By morning, Chicago was buried under 8 inches with more forecast. The streets were passable, but treacherous. Most businesses opened late or not at all. At 7:45, Malik Carter walked into the office. Victoria was already there, standing at her window, watching the city struggle through the storm. She'd been awake since 4, thinking about Richard's words, about the gala, about the cold weight of her penthouse at 3 in the morning. Coffee is by your desk, Malik said. I had to walk the last 6 blocks. The bus couldn't make it up Michigan. She turned. His coat was covered in snow, his deep brown hands red from the cold, but his expression was calm, unchanged. He'd walked through a blizzard to be on time. Why? The question left her mouth before she'd fully formed it. He paused, coat half removed. Ma'am, why are you here? Everyone else called in. The partners are working from home. But you walked 6 blocks through a blizzard. He finished removing his coat, shook off the snow. It's my job. You have a daughter. She's with a neighbor. She's safe. Victoria studied him. 3 years of working together, and she'd never really looked at him. Not as a person. He was simply the mechanism that kept her schedule running. But now, watching him hang his coat carefully on the rack, brush snow from his suit shoulders with practiced efficiency, she saw something else. Reliability, the kind that wasn't performative or strategic. I need to ask you something. The words came out harder than she intended. He turned, waiting. Snow melted on his shoulders, leaving dark spots on the fabric. Sit down. He hesitated. They'd never had this kind of conversation, but complied, taking one of the chairs across from her desk. She didn't sit. Standing felt easier for what she was about to say. I want to make you an offer. If this is about a raise, it's not. She crossed to the window, unable to look at him for this. I want you to marry me. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, snow fell in thick curtains, muffling the city. Inside, she could hear her own heartbeat. I'm sorry. His voice was careful, professional, even now. A marriage, legal, formal, public. She turned to face him. The terms would be simple. You would receive $2 million, $1 million immediately, $1 million after 2 years. During that time, you'd live in my building, attend events as needed, maintain the appearance of a relationship. After 2 years, we divorce quietly. You keep the money, no strings. Malik's expression hadn't changed. He sat perfectly still, processing. That's not relevant to the offer. It is if you're asking me to lie for 2 years. Fair point. Victoria moved to her desk, put her hands flat on the surface. I was humiliated recently by someone who matters to people I do business with. This would complicate his narrative. Revenge strategy. And you're choosing me because you're reliable, because you don't ask questions, because you need money. And I need someone who won't turn this into something it isn't. He leaned back slightly. Snow continued melting on his shoulders. His expression was unreadable. I have a daughter. I'm aware this would affect her life. The money would give her opportunities she won't have otherwise. Model, $2 million. He said it quietly, like testing the weight of the number. And after 2 years, you'd want me gone. The marriage would end. You could stay employed if you wanted, or take the money and start something new. He stood, walked to the window she'd been standing at. The snow had intensified. Lake Michigan was invisible behind white walls of wind. I need to think about it. You have 24 hours. He nodded without turning around. May I ask one more question? Would Nia be part of this? The appearances, the events? That would be your decision. He turned then, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something sharp in his expression. Not anger, but evaluation. He was looking at her the way she looked at investment opportunities, calculating risk, weighing potential, searching for hidden costs. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. He walked past her, collected his coat. I'm taking the rest of the day. Family emergency. Of course. He left without another word. Through the glass, she watched him wait for the elevator, coat dripping snow melt onto the carpet. The doors opened. He stepped inside. Gone. Victoria sat at her desk and pulled up a legal document she'd had drafted 3 days ago. She'd been thinking about this since the gala. The specifics had crystallized overnight. Malik Carter was the logical choice, trustworthy, self-contained, already in her orbit. The money would change his life. The arrangement would solve her problem. It was objectively a sound business decision. She ignored the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Richard. But no man will ever truly love you. This wasn't about love. It was about control. Outside, the snow kept falling. The courthouse was nearly empty at 10 a.m. On a Wednesday, snow fell steadily outside, accumulating on the steps, turning the city into a white maze. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over linoleum floors that squeaked under dress shoes. Malik Carter arrived 5 minutes early, wearing his best suit, the one he saved for important occasions. Navy blue, slightly too big in the shoulders from weight he'd lost since buying it. Nia held his hand, wearing a blue dress that made her big brown eyes look even larger. Her warm brown skin contrasted with the winter light. She was quiet, which meant she was nervous. "Is Miss Hale nice?" she asked. "She's fair." Malik squeezed her hand. "You don't have to worry. But you're getting married." "I know, sweetheart. Mom got married again and didn't tell me until after." "This is different." Nia looked up at him with the devastating clarity only 7-year-olds possess. "How?" He didn't have an answer that wouldn't be a lie. Victoria arrived at exactly 10. She wore a cream-colored suit, simple and expensive. No veil, no flowers, no jewelry beyond the pearl earrings she always wore. Her lawyer followed 3 steps behind, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Carter." She extended her hand. He shook it. Professional, formal. "Miss Hale." Her gaze dropped to Naya. Something flickered in her expression. Not quite warmth, but perhaps recognition that this was more complicated than a business merger. A small black girl in a blue dress, holding tightly to her father's dark brown hand. "You must be Nia." Nia nodded, stepping slightly behind her father's leg. "I'm Victoria. Your father works for me." "I know." Soft voice, uncertain. "I hope this won't be too confusing for you." Nia said nothing. Malik put his hand on her shoulder for support. The magistrate called them in at 10:15. The room was small, institutional. A desk, a flag, a woman in her 50s who'd clearly done this 1,000 times. The lawyer handed over paperwork. The magistrate reviewed it with practiced efficiency. "Any objections to this union?" Silence. Outside wind rattled the windows. "Please face each other." They did. Victoria's expression was neutral, controlled. Malik's was careful, giving nothing away. Between them, Nia stood beside her father, one small hand gripping his fingers. The vows were standard, perfunctory. No personal additions, no meaningful glances, just legal language recited without emotion. When it came time for rings, Victoria produced 2 simple bands, white gold, no stones, purchased that morning. She'd guessed at Malik's size. It fit. "You may kiss the bride." They didn't. Instead, Malik extended his hand. Victoria took it. They shook firmly like closing a business deal. The magistrate looked mildly confused, but said nothing. She'd probably seen stranger. "Congratulations, you are now legally married." The lawyer had them sign papers. Malik signed carefully, reading each line. Nia watched everything with wide eyes. Victoria signed with the same pen she used to close investments. Quick, decisive strokes. They walked out into the snow together. The city moved around them, indifferent to the fact that 2 strangers had just legally bound their lives together. Cars passed, spraying gray slush. People hurried by, heads down against the wind. "My lawyer will have the first payment transferred by the end of the day." Victoria's voice was businesslike. "I've arranged for movers to collect your things Friday. The apartment is ready. We'll need to get Nia's school transfer sorted." "Already done. The new school is 3 blocks from the building. Better district, smaller class sizes." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You've thought of everything." "That's what I do." Nia tugged on his hand. "Dad." "Yes, baby." "Can we go home?" He crouched down to her level, snow collecting on his shoulders. "We'll go get lunch first. Your favorite place. Then we'll talk about everything. Okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were uncertain. Victoria watched this exchange without comment. When Malik stood, she spoke quietly. "I'll need you both at a dinner party Saturday, 8 p.m. Nothing formal, but people will ask questions. We should coordinate our story. We met at work, fell in love quietly. Decided not to wait." Malik's voice was flat, rehearsed. "Simple enough." "That works." She pulled her coat tighter against the wind. "I'll see you both Saturday." She walked away without looking back. Her driver materialized from somewhere, umbrella raised against the snow. She climbed into the car and was gone, leaving Malik and Nia standing on the courthouse steps. Yeah, she didn't look happy. Malik pulled his daughter close, shielding her from the wind. No, she didn't. "Are you happy?" He thought about the $2 million, about Nia's new school, about the opportunities this would create, about the fact that he'd just married a woman he barely knew for money, stepping into a world where, as a black man, he was usually either invisible or scrutinized. "I'm doing what's best for us," he said finally, which wasn't an answer. And they both knew it. They walked through the snow toward the restaurant. Father and daughter, newly part of something neither fully understood yet. Behind them, the courthouse stood gray and permanent. One more building in a city full of them, witnessing arrangements that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with survival. The snow kept falling, covering their footprints as fast as they made them. The coffee shop was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore 2 blocks from Nia's new school. Victoria had never been inside before, but Malik had mentioned it once, said the hot chocolate was the best in the neighborhood. She arrived at 3:30 when school let out. Through the window, she could see Malik and Nia at a corner table, father and daughter, heads close together over homework. Nia's tight black curls caught the afternoon light. Malik's hand rested on the table near hers, protective without smothering. Victoria pushed open the door. A bell chimed. Both looked up. "Miss Hale." Malik's voice was neutral. "I was nearby. Thought I'd stop in." A lie, but a small one. Nia watched her with the cautious curiosity of a child trying to figure out where an adult fits in their suddenly rearranged world. It had been 3 weeks since the courthouse. 3 weeks of Malik and Nia living in a 2-bedroom apartment 4 floors below Victoria's penthouse. 3 weeks of careful distance, coordinated schedules, public appearances that felt like theater. "Would you like to sit?" Malik gestured to this empty chair. Victoria sat. The table was scarred wood, the chair slightly wobbly. The shop smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans. Nothing like the places she usually frequented. "How's school?" she asked. Nia shrugged. "Okay." "Better than your old one?" Another shrug. "I don't know yet." Honest. Children were brutally honest when adults let them be. A waitress approached. Victoria ordered coffee. Nia returned to her homework. Math problems involving fractions. Malik helped quietly, patient when she got frustrated. Victoria watched them. This was the real Malik Carter, she realized, not the efficient secretary who brought her coffee at 7:45. This was the man who existed outside her sphere, gentle with his daughter, careful to let her work through problems instead of solving them for her. "Miss Hale?" Nia's voice was small. "You can call me Victoria." Victoria testing the name. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When the contract is over, will you be sad?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Malik went very still beside his daughter. The coffee shop continued around them. Other customers talking, the espresso machine hissing. Snow falling outside. "Why do you ask that?" Victoria's voice was careful. "'Cause Dad said, this is for 2 years and then you'll divorce." "But Nia," Malik started. "It's okay." Victoria held up a hand. She looked at the girl, saw intelligence there, saw someone who deserved more than a corporate answer. "That's a very good question." "So, what's the answer?" Victoria thought about Richard's words, about the penthouse at 3 in the morning, about the way Malik had shaken her hand instead of kissing her at the courthouse. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "adults make arrangements that help both people. Your father needed something and I needed something, so we made a deal. But you're not in love. Then it's not a real marriage." "Legally it is." Nia frowned, processing this. "That's sad. Maybe when it's over, will you miss us?" The question was so simple, so direct, that Victoria felt something crack in her chest. She looked at Malik, found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not quite hostile, but deeply protective of his daughter. "I don't know," Victoria said finally. "Honest, because this child deserved honesty. I've never done anything like this before." Nia nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. She returned to her homework. Malik helped her with another problem. The moment passed, but Victoria sat there, coffee growing cold in front of her, watching this small family continue their afternoon routine, and she realized that for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't thinking about quarterly returns or market fluctuations or Richard's smug face. She was thinking about a 7-year-old's question. "Will you be sad?" Outside, snow began falling again, light at first, then heavier. The kind of snow that changed the city's rhythm, made everything slower, softer. Victoria finished her coffee. Malik packed up Nia's homework. "We should head home," he said, "before the snow gets worse." "I'll walk with you." They left the coffee shop together, the 3 of them walking through the accumulating snow toward the building they all now called home. Nia walked between them, occasionally reaching out to catch snowflakes. Malik carried her backpack. Victoria pulled her coat tighter. No one spoke, but something had shifted, something small but undeniable, and Victoria realized that the cold she felt now wasn't from the weather. The Tribune article appeared on a Thursday morning, page 6 of the business section. But enough people read it that Victoria's phone started ringing before she finished her first coffee. Venture capitalist Victoria Hale marries secretary in surprise winter wedding. The article was carefully neutral, just facts, no commentary, but the implication was clear. The quotes from unnamed sources made it clearer. It seems sudden, perhaps related to recent public appearances with her former partner. Unconventional choice for someone of her status. By noon, the whispers had reached every corner of the financial district. Victoria sat through a board meeting where 3 of 7 members avoided eye contact. During lunch, a colleague she'd known for 15 years made a joke about cradle robbing and paying for company. She smiled coldly and said nothing. The real attack came from Richard. He'd waited until Friday, letting the story percolate. Then he gave an interview to a business podcast, one of those casual conversational shows where executives pretended to be vulnerable while carefully crafting their images. The host asked about Victoria. Richard laughed, that specific laugh that said, "I'm being diplomatic, but we both know the truth." "Look, I wish Victoria well. I really do. But this marriage, come on, it's transparent. She's trying to prove something." "To whom?" "I don't know. But marrying your secretary, a single father who makes $40,000 a year, that's not love. That's desperation dressed up as rebellion." The episode went viral in their industry. By Saturday morning, Victoria had received 18 calls, 7 emails, and countless messages, half offering sympathy, half barely concealing schadenfreude. Malik said nothing about it. He showed up at 7:45 Monday morning with coffee as always, worked through his tasks with the same steady efficiency. If he'd heard the podcast or read the articles, he gave no indication, but Victoria noticed things. The way other employees in the building looked at him, now a mix of pity and contempt. The way conversations stopped when he walked into the break room. The way someone had left a printed copy of the Tribune article on his desk, anonymous and cruel. He'd simply thrown it away and continued working. Wednesday afternoon, she found him in her office, standing at the window. Snow was falling again, the city's constant companion through winter. He held a tablet, screen dark. "You should see this," he said quietly. She took the tablet. An industry news site had published an opinion piece. The headline made her jaw tighten. "When Billionaires Playhouse, Victoria Hale's embarrassing publicity stunt." The article was vicious. It questioned her judgment, suggested she was unstable, implied the marriage was either a breakdown or a calculated move to generate sympathy. It mentioned Malik by name, painting him as an opportunist willing to sell out for money. The worst part, it was written by someone she'd mentored 5 years ago, a woman she'd given her first major break. "I'm sorry," she said. Malik took back the tablet. "Don't be. I knew what I was signing up for." "Did you?" She looked at him. "Did you really think it would be this vicious?" "I thought it would be worse, actually." He set the tablet down. "Rich people marrying poor people always makes for entertainment. Add in the fact that I'm your employee, that you're a woman with power, that this looks like revenge." He shrugged. "We're a good story. Stories get told. It doesn't bother you?" "Of course it bothers me." For the first time, she heard something sharp in his voice. "I have a daughter who asks why kids at school say mean things about her dad. I have colleagues who treat me like I'm either a gold digger or a prostitute. And as a black man married to a white billionaire, I know exactly how fast people decide they know my motives. But I made a deal. $2 million. I knew it would cost something beyond the obvious." Victoria turned back to the window. The snow was getting heavier. "Richard's behind the worst of it. He's feeding stories to people, making sure this stays in the news." "I know. You know, I worked for you for 3 years before this started. I know how business wars work. He's trying to destabilize you professionally by making you look unstable personally." "It's working." "Is it?" Malik moved beside her at the window, close enough that she could see his reflection in the glass. "You've closed 3 deals since we got married. The Thompson acquisition went through. The Riverside development is ahead of schedule. Your portfolio is up 8%. The board is questioning my judgment." "The board always questions something. That's their job." He was quiet for a moment. "You hired me because I'm reliable and don't ask questions. But I'm asking one now. Do you want out?" She looked at him. "Of the marriage. I'll return the money. We can announce an amicable split. You can say it was a mistake. Your reputation takes a hit, but it recovers. I go back to being your secretary, or I leave quietly. Nia and I move back to our old apartment. Life continues." It was a reasonable offer, a clean exit from a situation that was becoming more complicated than either had anticipated. They'd been married 6 weeks. The damage could still be contained. "No," Victoria said. "I don't run from fights, and I don't let Richard Vaughn dictate my decisions." Something shifted in Malik's expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps respect. "Then we hold the line. It'll get worse before it gets better." "I know." They stood together at the window watching snow fall over the city. Somewhere below, in those buildings and streets, people were telling stories about them, laughing at them, pitching their marriage as everything from sad to scandalous. Let them, Victoria thought. Let them laugh. She'd built an empire while people laughed before. The Winter Investor Conference was held at the Fairmont in the first week of February. 300 of the city's most influential financial players gathered to discuss market trends, network, and display their relevance. Victoria had attended for 12 consecutive years. This year felt different. She arrived with Malik. No longer her secretary in practical terms, he'd been reassigned to the main office. Technically her husband's public position, but still the person who organized her schedule, prepared her materials, ensured the infrastructure of her life continued functioning. As they walked through the lobby, Victoria felt the curious eyes on them linger a little longer on Malik, the only black man in most of these rooms who wasn't holding a tray or checking a coat. The main conference hall buzzed with controlled energy. Men in expensive suits, women in power dresses, everyone performing confidence while calculating angles. Victoria worked the room with practiced ease, but she felt the difference. Conversations were shorter, smiles more forced. The whispers following her were louder than usual. At 11, the keynote began. Victoria sat front row as she always did. Malik sat beside her. In previous years, she'd attended alone or with Richard. Now, people stared at them openly. A millionaire and her former secretary playing at marriage. The keynote was boring, standard discussion of interest rates and market corrections. Victoria checked her phone discreetly. 3 texts from board members, 2 emails flagged urgent, and a message from her assistant. Carlton withdrew from the Phoenix Project, effective immediately, no reason given. The Phoenix Project was her largest pending investment. 18 months of work, $23 million on the table. Carlton's participation was essential. He was bringing the technical expertise that made the venture viable. She felt the conference room tilt slightly. At the break, she found Carlton near the coffee station. He was 56, competent, someone she'd worked with successfully 3 times before. "Carlton." He turned, looked uncomfortable. "Victoria, I got your message." "Yes, well, for the best. We're 3 weeks from closing." "I know, but..." He glanced around, lowered his voice. "Look, you're dealing with some personal situations. The publicity hasn't been great. My partners think it's better to step back until things settle. My personal life has nothing to do with the Phoenix deal. Maybe not, but optics matter, and right now the optics of being associated with you are complicated." He walked away before she could respond. Victoria stood by the coffee station watching him rejoin his group. They were all looking at her, evaluating, deciding she was now a risk. She returned to the conference hall, sat through the rest of the keynote without hearing a word. Malik said nothing, but she could feel him watching her, reading the situation with the same quiet attention he'd always had. At lunch, things got worse. She was seated at a table with 7 other investors. 3 she knew well. 4 were newer relationships. The conversation flowed around market analysis and upcoming opportunities until someone, Martin Chen, a hedge fund manager she'd always found insufferable, smiled too widely and asked, "So, Victoria, how's married life treating you?" The table went quiet. Everyone suddenly very focused on their salmon. "Fine," she said evenly. "Must be quite an adjustment for both of you." He looked at Malik, who sat calmly, fork in hand. "What's it like going from filing her paperwork to..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The implication hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Malik set down his fork carefully. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear enough that the entire table heard. "Mr. Chen, I've read your quarterly reports. Your fund is down 17% year over year. You've hemorrhaged 3 major clients in 6 months. And your strategy papers read like someone who learned investing from motivational posters." The table froze. "My wife," Malik continued, still calm, his dark brown hands resting lightly on the table, has built a $300 million portfolio through strategic vision and disciplined execution. She saw potential in 17 ventures that everyone else dismissed. 14 are now major successes. The 3 that failed were calculated risks. Meanwhile, you're bleeding capital and credibility because you chase trends instead of understanding fundamentals. He picked up his fork again. So when you ask what it's like being married to her, it's like being married to someone who actually knows what she's doing. You should try it sometime. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. Then someone laughed. Sarah Winters, a real estate developer Victoria respected. Christ, Chen, he's got you there. The tension broke. Conversation resumed. Chen said nothing else, face red. Victoria looked at Malik. He was eating his salmon like nothing had happened, but she noticed his hand wasn't quite steady. After lunch, in the hallway outside the conference rooms, she pulled him aside. That was dangerous. Martin has influence. You just made an enemy. I made an enemy defending my wife. He looked at her. Isn't that what husbands do? This is a contract, Malik, not a real marriage. You don't need to. I know what it is. His voice was sharp now, the control finally cracking. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit there while people insult you to your face. Contract or not, I have some self-respect. And for whatever it's worth, so do you. He walked away, leaving her in the hallway. That afternoon, Victoria presented her market analysis to a packed room. Usually she drew 200 attendees. Today, nearly 300 showed up, some genuinely interested, some just wanting to see if she'd crumble under pressure. She delivered the presentation flawlessly. 60 minutes, no notes, devastating precision. When she opened for questions, someone asked about Carlton withdrawing. She addressed it directly, acknowledged the loss, outlined contingency plans, explained why Phoenix would succeed regardless. From the back of the room, she saw Malik watching, not in the front row where spouses usually sat. In the back, standing, arms crossed, just present. When she finished, the applause was cautious but real. She'd held ground, proven she wasn't collapsing. Later, in the car back to the city, Malik broke the silence. I'm sorry about lunch. Don't be. Chen is an idiot. You were right to call him out. Still, I overstepped. Victoria watched the city pass through the window. Snow had started again, light and persistent. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being there. For defending me when you didn't have to. He didn't respond immediately. Then, contract or not, nobody gets to treat you like that, not while I'm around. Something in her chest tightened. She'd paid him $2 million to pretend to be her husband. She hadn't paid him to actually act like one, but somehow that's what was happening. The photograph appeared on a financial gossip site at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Victoria was working late in her home office when her phone buzzed with the alert. The image showed Malik leaving an office building downtown. Not unusual, except he was with a woman, blonde, professional, attractive. They were standing close, his hand on her arm, her expression concerned. The caption read, "Already trouble in paradise?" Victoria stared at the photo. The angle made it look intimate, like a secret meeting, like everything the cynics had been saying was true. She called him immediately. I saw it, he said before she could speak. His voice was tired. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? Caroline is a social worker. She handles Nia's case from the divorce. We were meeting about custody documentation because my ex is trying to change the arrangement. Why didn't you tell me about the meeting? Because it's personal. It's not part of our deal. Our deal. The words landed like ice water because that's what this was, wasn't it? A deal. A contract. She'd been starting to forget that, and apparently he hadn't. This looks bad, she said. I know. The timing couldn't be worse, after everything with Carlton, with the conference. I know. Did you consider how this would affect things? Silence on the line. Then, quietly, did you consider how your business wars would affect my daughter? Victoria stopped. What? Nia came home crying today. Some kid at school told her that her dad is a prostitute who sold himself for money. Another said you're a crazy woman who bought a family because nobody would love her for free. His voice was controlled, but she heard the rage underneath. She asked me if those things were true. My 7-year-old daughter asked me if I'm a prostitute, Victoria. So, no, I didn't consider how meeting with my daughter's social worker would look in your business war with Richard. I was busy trying to keep my kid from completely falling apart. He hung up. Victoria sat in her office, phone dark in her hand. Outside, the city glittered with indifferent beauty. Somewhere in this building, 4 floors below, Malik was dealing with a crying child while she worried about optics. The gossip site updated an hour later. More photos, different angles. One showed Malik and Caroline through a coffee shop window, papers spread between them. Another showed them on the street, clearly just talking. Context that made it obvious this was a professional meeting, not an affair. But the damage was done. By morning, the story had spread. The narrative was set. Victoria Hale's contract marriage was already failing. Her husband was cheating. The whole thing was falling apart exactly as everyone predicted. She didn't sleep. At 6 a.m., she went down to Malik's apartment, knocked on the door. He answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept either. "Can I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was smaller than hers, but warmer. Nia's drawings on the refrigerator, homework on the kitchen counter, a framed photo of Malik, Nia, and Malik's parents at some long-ago cookout, a beautiful black family squeezed together and smiling, a life being lived, not just maintained. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, "about yesterday, about not considering what this is doing to Nia. Are you?" He leaned against the counter. "Or are you sorry that it's affecting your reputation?" "That's not fair, isn't it? This whole thing started because you wanted to prove something to Richard. Everything since then has been about managing appearances and controlling narratives. When did you stop to think about the actual people involved?" "I think about it constantly." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you've treated this exactly like a business deal. Calculated risks, acceptable losses, strategic adjustments. Nia isn't an acceptable loss, Victoria. And neither am I." She felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was a mistake." He ran his hand through his hair. "Watching my daughter cry because kids are saying terrible things about her father. Watching you spiral because you're more worried about Carlton than about us. Maybe no amount of money is worth this. You're breaking the contract. I'm protecting my daughter. After 2 months, you're walking away. After 2 months. What do you want me to do, Victoria? Stay here while Nia gets destroyed. While you treat us like props in your performance. I have never." "You have. You've been kind, sure. Generous? Well, but I have my own problems, and they're bigger than your bruised ego." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out everything she'd done, the opportunities she'd created, the life she'd given them. But looking at his face, exhausted, angry, hurt, she realized he was right. She'd been so focused on winning against Richard that she'd forgotten why this started. Or maybe she'd never really known. "I'll have my lawyer draw up termination papers," she said quietly. "Keep the money." "What?" "The $1 million you already paid. Keep it." "I don't want it anymore." "Malik, I need you to leave." She left, walked back to the elevator, rode it up to her penthouse. The space felt even emptier than usual. She'd gotten used to knowing there were people in the building, that 4 floors down a father was helping his daughter with homework, that someone existed in her orbit who wasn't there for money or networking or mutual benefit. That night she worked until 3 a.m., closed a deal, answered emails, did everything she always did. But when she finally stopped and looked around her penthouse, all 3,500 square feet of carefully designed emptiness, she felt exactly like she had the night of the gala. Rich, powerful, alone. 2 days later, Malik submitted his resignation. Professional letter, 2 weeks notice, no explanation beyond personal reasons. He'd already found a new apartment, already withdrawn Nia from her new school. He was erasing himself from her life with the same quiet efficiency he'd brought to organizing it. She signed the resignation letter without comment. That night it snowed, heavy, relentless, the kind of storm that shut down the city. Victoria stood at her window watching it fall, thinking about a 7-year-old's question in a coffee shop. "When the contract is over, will you be sad?" She'd said she didn't know. Now she did. Victoria closed the Riverside deal in March. $38 million, 3 years of work, every clause negotiated to perfection. The contracts were signed in a conference room overlooking the frozen lake, snow still covering the city like a shroud. She stood at the window afterward, champagne in hand, while her team celebrated behind her. They'd won. Another successful venture. Her portfolio was now worth $320 million. She felt nothing. Richard called that evening. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "I heard about Riverside. Congratulations." "Thank you. I also heard about your domestic situation. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Are you? He laughed, that same laugh from the gala, knowing and cruel. Not really, but I'm trying to be diplomatic. Try harder. She hung up. The penthouse was exactly as it had been before Malik, before the marriage, before any of this started. Clean, organized, expensive furniture arranged for maximum aesthetic impact. Art on the walls purchased because it was a good investment, not because it meant anything. She ordered dinner from the place she always ordered from, ate at her kitchen counter alone, watching snow fall outside. The food was excellent and tasted like nothing. Her phone showed messages from colleagues about Riverside, congratulations, invitations to celebrate, requests for meetings to discuss next opportunities. The machinery of her professional life continued, indifferent to her personal implosion. She ignored all of it. At 9 p.m., she found herself pulling up the building's security footage. She could access it remotely. Perk of owning the penthouse. She shouldn't have been watching. Knew it was invasive. But she pulled up footage from the lobby anyway. Looking for there. Malik and Nia leaving with suitcases. 3 days ago. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m. Nia held her father's hand, dragging a small pink suitcase. Malik carried the rest. They waited for a car, snow falling around them through the building's entrance. Nia looked up at her father and said something. Malik crouched down, hugged her. The gesture was so gentle, so full of protection and love, that Victoria had to close the footage. She poured herself scotch, expensive single malt that Richard had given her for her 40th birthday, back when they were still together, back when she thought that maybe, possibly, she'd found someone who saw her as more than her bank account. The scotch tasted like smoke and regret. Her phone buzzed. Alexandra Song, one of the partners. Text message. Drinks tomorrow, celebrating Riverside properly. Victoria typed back, can't. Schedule's full. It wasn't. She just couldn't imagine sitting in a bar, pretending she felt triumphant. She walked through her penthouse, master bedroom with the view she'd specifically requested. Guest bedroom that had never hosted a guest. Home office with her awards and certifications. Kitchen she barely used. Living room with furniture that cost more than some people's cars. Every inch of it perfect. Every inch of it empty. She ended up back at the window. Always back at the window, watching the city, watching the snow. Chicago in winter was beautiful in a harsh way. Unforgiving, honest about what it was. Her phone buzzed again, this time an email from her lawyer. She opened it. The divorce papers, fully executed. She'd signed them 2 weeks ago. Malik had signed yesterday. It was over. Legally, officially, completely over. 2 months. The marriage had lasted 2 months. She should have felt relieved. This was always supposed to be temporary. 2 years had been the plan, but an early exit was cleaner. She could tell people it had been a mistake, a brief lapse in judgment. Richard would gloat, but he'd gloat anyway. Her reputation would recover. It always did. She sat on her couch, $12,000, imported Italian leather, and realized she was crying. Not sobbing, just tears, silent and steady, running down her face while she sat in her perfect penthouse with her $320 million and her successful career, and absolutely nobody to share it with. Richard had been right at the gala. No man would ever truly love her. But he'd been wrong about why. It wasn't because she was unlovable. It was because she'd spent so long building walls that she'd forgotten how to let anyone inside. And when someone had tried, when Malik and Nia had existed in her orbit, bringing warmth and chaos and real human mess, she'd treated it like a business arrangement. She'd won at business. She always did. But she'd lost at everything else. The snow kept falling. The city kept glittering. And Victoria Hale sat alone in her penthouse, understanding for the first time that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. The park was 5 blocks from Malik's new apartment. Victoria had gotten the address from building records, not her proudest moment. But she was past worrying about that now. She'd walked through snow for 20 minutes, her expensive coat inadequate for the cold, her shoes wrong for the weather. She found them at the playground, Nia on the swings, Malik pushing her. Both bundled against the cold. The park was nearly empty. Only crazy people brought their kids to playgrounds in late March snowstorms. She stood at the fence, watching them for a moment. Nia's laughter carried across the snow, bright and clear. Malik said something that made her laugh harder. Father and daughter, their own complete unit. needing nothing from Victoria's world. Malik saw her first. He said something to Nia, who looked over. The swing slowed. They walked toward the fence together. Victoria. His voice was neutral, careful. Hi. She felt stupid suddenly, aware of how she must look. Desperate woman chasing down the man she'd paid to marry her. I'm sorry for showing up like this. How did you? Building records. I know it's invasive. I'm sorry. Nia tugged on Malik's hand. Can I keep playing? He looked at Victoria, some silent question in his eyes. You should have called, he said. Would you have answered? Probably not. Fair enough. They stood on opposite sides of the fence, a physical barrier, symbolic too. Snow collected on their coats. I wanted to apologize, Victoria said. For everything. For treating you and Nia like pieces in a game. For not seeing what this was doing to you until it was too late. Okay, that's it? Okay. What do you want me to say, Victoria? That it's fine? It's not. That I forgive you? I don't know if I do yet. You paid me to pretend to be your husband, and I agreed because I needed money. We both made choices that hurt people, especially Nia. I know, and I'm sorry, truly. He was quiet, watching his daughter play. Then why are you here? Because I miss you. The words came out raw, unplanned. Malik looked at her sharply. I miss coffee at 7:45. I miss knowing you're 4 floors down. I miss Nia asking impossible questions in coffee shops. I miss having people in my life who see me as something other than an investment opportunity. You paid us to see you that way. I know, that's what makes this so stupid. She laughed, harsh and broken. I arranged everything. I set the terms. I made sure it stayed transactional. And then I got upset when it felt transactional. What do you want from me? I don't know. To try again, maybe. Differently this time. No contract, no money. Just see if there's something real underneath all the business arrangements. Malik stared at her. Snow fell between them, accumulating on the ground, on their shoulders, in their hair. Somewhere behind him, Nia called out that she could swing really high now. That's a terrible idea, he said finally. I know. I don't trust you. You don't trust yourself. We both have damage. And Nia, I would never hurt Nia again, I swear. You can't promise that. People hurt each other. It's what we do. Then let me try to hurt her less. Let me try to be better. He was quiet for a long time. Nia ran over, cheeks pink from cold and exertion. Dad, can we get hot chocolate? Yeah, baby, in a minute. Nia looked at Victoria. Are you coming? That's up to your father. Nia looked between them, smart enough to sense the tension, but young enough not to understand it fully. I think she should come. She looks cold. Malika almost smiled. Almost. Out of the mouths of babes. One hot chocolate at the place near here. And then we talk. Really talk about what this would actually mean. Okay. They walked together through the snow, Nia between them, holding both their hands. The coffee shop was warm, crowded, smelling of cinnamon and coffee beans. They found a table in the back, ordered drinks, sat in awkward silence until they arrived. Then Malik spoke. If we do this, and I'm not saying we should, but if we do, there's no contract, no money, no timeline. Agreed. You'd have to accept that I come with complications. An ex-wife who's unpredictable, a daughter who needs stability, a life that doesn't revolve around business deals. I understand. Do you? Because 2 months ago you thought you did, and it fell apart. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I learned. What did you learn? Victoria looked at Nia, who was more focused on her hot chocolate than on them, then back at Malik. That success means nothing if you're alone. That money can't buy the things that actually matter. That I'd rather risk failing at something real than succeed at something empty. He studied her face, looking for truth or lies or whatever he needed to see. I can't promise this works. I know. I can't promise I'll ever fully trust you. I know. And if you hurt Nia again, we're done. Completely. Forever. I understand. Nia looked up. Are you guys getting married again? Maybe, Malik said carefully. Someday. If we can figure out how to do it right. The first time didn't count anyway, Nia said matter-of-factly. You didn't even kiss. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in weeks. Malik smiled. Small, cautious, but real. She's got a point, Victoria said. She usually does. They sat in the coffee shop while snow continued falling outside. No contracts signed, no terms negotiated, just 3 people trying to figure out if something real could grow from something that had started all wrong. It would be hard. Victoria knew that. There would be mistakes, misunderstandings, moments when her instinct to control everything would clash with the messy reality of actual relationships. But as she watched Malik help Naya with her hot chocolate, as she felt the warmth of the shop and the possibility of trying again, she realized something important. She'd spent her entire life winning at business. Maybe it was time to learn how to win at something else. The spring gala was at the same hotel where it had all started. Victoria arrived with Malik, no longer her secretary, but her partner in the truest sense. Nia was at home with a babysitter, probably reading the book series she'd become obsessed with. They'd taken the year slowly. Actually dating. Dinners where they talked about things beyond schedules, weekends where Malik introduced her to his world, Nia's school events, neighborhood barbecues, the kind of normal life Victoria had never experienced. Sunday afternoons at his parents' place where she was just the woman Malik was seeing, not the billionaire in the room. It hadn't been easy. They'd fought. She'd reverted to treating him like an employee twice before catching herself. He'd been guarded, waiting for her to prove she was serious. But they'd pushed through, and somewhere in the process, something real had grown. Richard was at the gala. Of course he was. He approached them at the bar. Smile practiced. Victoria, Malik. He nodded to them both. I heard you're back together. We are, Victoria said simply. Brave. Most people don't get second chances. Most people don't deserve them, Malik said quietly. We were lucky. Richard looked between them, searching for the angle, the strategy, but there wasn't one. Just two people who'd found something worth fighting for. Well, Richard said finally, I wish you the best. He walked away. Victoria watched him go, feeling nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just indifference. You okay? Malik asked. I'm perfect. They spent the evening working the room together. Not as millionaire and employee, not as a publicity stunt, but as partners. Equals. When they left at 11, snow was falling light. Beautiful. The first of what the forecast said would be a gentle night. In the car, Malik took her hand. I'm proud of you, he said. For what? For not needing to prove anything tonight. For just being. I had a good teacher. Victoria laughed. Actually, yes. They drove through the snow-covered city, heading home. Not to a penthouse she lived in alone, but to the apartment they'd moved into together last month. Modest by her previous standards, but full of life. Nia's artwork on the walls, books everywhere, the kind of comfortable mess that meant people actually lived there. Victoria Hale had spent her life building an empire, but she'd finally learned that the best things couldn't be bought or negotiated. They had to be earned. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly wealthy.